Hey, Douglas Scott McCarron again. This is for whatever reason, I seem to be fascinated with a lot of philosophy and religion and being, and it's always kind of puzzled me because I sort of assumed everybody was into that. But I've kind of noticed a lot of people just want to get drunk and screw. They don't really seem to think it's important. But I know, like by the age of 4, I'm really fascinated. I'm like starting to listen to a lot of Bible kind of stuff and learning about different religions. So don't really know why. I I used to think there was something wrong with me, but this seems to be the way I am. Anyway, I want to talk about the God. Um, in the Bible, we have this God that we translate. The name is Yahweh. A lot of people would just call it the Tetragrammaton. In Orthodox Hebrew, they just leave a blank spot because you can't really say the name of God. It's not that it's bad to say it or it's evil, it's just you can't say it. Um, in the beginning of the start of the books, God is with a council, and he's like one among many gods, but he's like the head god. And if you go far enough back, actually, there's a lot of discussion about Baal, and he's the Canaanite god, and he's an evil god, kind of a storm god who lives out on the more out on the sea coast. It's like rain, a storm, but mildly gentle. Whereas Yahweh, because Israel and Judah were up in the hills, Yahweh was also a storm god, but the water would collect up and go rushing through, rampaging along. So he's a little bit more violent. And he was also, for whatever reason, the Hebrew tribes, the Jewish tribes, picked him or he picked them. You know, who knows, when you read the Bible, who knows how it's actually working? It claims that he calls them, but a lot of people kind of get upset at him because he's this kind of mean, bloodthirsty kind of God that demands sacrifice. Later on, it becomes different, but you know, this is the national God of a very tiny group of people who, you know, there's like when David is king, and they talk about holy Jerusalem and everything. You're probably talking about a town that's not very big, maybe has a few thousand, maybe 5,000 people, and he's kind of like the local tough guy, I guess. He's local gang leader. Um, and they have a pact that's kind of a protection pact that, you know, if we give offerings to Yahweh, Yahweh will come in and protect us. And so you have all these stories about Yahweh going out and slaughtering other peoples and dethroning their gods, which doesn't sound like the particularly loving, wonderful God that's come down to us. But you know, if you're a little tiny people who are always in danger of getting run over by the Assyrians or the Hittites or the Babylonians or the Egyptians, do you want a philosophical kind of we're all one kind of God, or do you want one who's got a big sword that's going to hack them down and keep them off your land? Most people, I think, would go for the second one. But there's always this sense that there's this over God, which eventually kind of got associated with Yahweh. And when you get into Christianity, it very much passes over, and that over God incarnated into Jesus and paid the atonement. But it's earlier on, it was like there wasn't really the sense of a the God. It's just a bunch of local gods. And yet everybody kind of believed there was the God. And then you had a bunch of little gods, principalities, and every town would have its own little god, but there was also the God that was over everything, which is part of the reason why what are called the pagans, as long as you believed in God, they didn't really care how you worshipped it because everybody knew it was the God you're trying to like talk to. And if you didn't worship a God, then you were like somebody who was opposed to the cosmic order. And order was very important. The whole, like, the gods, the way that it was conceived of is there was like undefined mist-like stuff, and then the gods brought order to this, which then caused what we call life. Without order, you don't have life. You don't have, if you don't have history and things being written down, you're just somebody who never existed somewhere back there. Even with writing it down, you know, if you go through the Bible and keep reading about these fabulously powerful, wise, wealthy kings that, you know, you have no idea who they are, who the name is, or what country they are. They're just back there and nobody remembers, which is what's going to happen to all of us. And it's going to happen to Putin and Trump and all the people are running around thinking they're important now. Christianity kind of upset that because they came in and they claimed the God incarnated, or I'm not quite sure what the word, showed up as in the form of Jesus. And this whole thing about, well, as long as you worship a God, you're worshiping the God. The Christians were like, no, that's not true. You have to hang out with this guy. So that's part of the reason to Roman ears, that seemed really crazy. But, you know, again, like the Romans they've set up all these legal codes that the background of what we have. Like they put order into years, like a century is 100 years. But a century is also a soldier within a military unit that marched around through the empire, keeping order, making sure nobody overthrew the order, keeping everybody in line and following the law. So you have order marching around through time and order marching around through the empire. And then you get a name within a family order. So it's all this putting order on things. But without it, you know, who knows? You know, we're still digging up cities that nobody even knew existed in Africa. They're like down 60, 70 yards in the dirt. There's no inscriptions about them, but there's obviously the large cities sitting there because there was nothing written down. Or something was written down, but it's been under that dirt for so long, it kind of just decayed and shredded up into the dirt and it's gone. But all those people did the same things we did, you know, different tools, different science. But and then a lot of gods, a lot of the people just they wanted to fight for their god because part of the way of how you decide who really is the god that's bringing order and who's just some made up god is you have a war, and if your side wins, you're the one whose god is keeping order, and the other side were non-believers. And quite often what would happen is like the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage is when after the third one Carthage lost, the Romans pretty much enslaved or killed all the men and took all the women to sell them off as sex slaves to whoever they wanted or taking home with them. And they just pulled down all the buildings of Carthage and destroyed their temples because that was a false god. It was the Roman gods that was the real god. Which is part of the reason when Christianity started taking off in Rome, the Romans were so perturbed by it, wanted to stomp it out. Because usually the Romans are like, yeah, whatever god you have, that's fine, just worship our gods too. Christians were like, nope, not going to happen. And the Romans, to the Romans' ear, that's like oh, you're opposed to order. You're opposed to the gods imposing order. You're like an anti-God person. So they tried to get rid of him. And then eventually Rome fell, and apparently Christianity took it over. Though there's a big debate whether Christianity actually won or not. It kind of put an hourglass. But another thing about the God, like Allah is a name, it's the name of God in Islam, but the name predates Islam by quite a while. And it actually, when you go back and look at it, it has the feeling of the God. And it was, again, everybody had these local gods, and then there was like the overarching God that ran everything. And I know a lot of people sit there and go, there's no God, but something's been going on for tens of thousands of years. Whatever that is a reflection of the God within these structures. I know when I used to say there's no God, I was kind of really very much inside my own internal worded discussing words, and kind of felt like I could choose and allow what was truth and what wasn't. Kind of ignoring that I'm just like 1/8 billionth of one species among hundreds of millions of species on this tiny little planet floating through endless space. And not very much in the position of deciding or allowing what's true. But anyway, so you have this the God in Islam that predates Islam. You have a similar concept in the Mesopotamian gods, which is what Judaism and then Christianity comes out of. In Hinduism, you have all these 10,000 gods, but in the end, when you boil it all down, they're all expressions somewhat like monism. Like there's just the one, and that's the God, and then Vishnu and all these people are expressions of it. And this is all just the God is out here running around experiencing every possible thing all the time in all different ways. Between really great, wonderful love and chocolate cake and mass suicide. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that whole idea there's this over God that is everything kind of seems to go back even before history starts getting written down, because the histories are referring to stuff before the histories are being written about the God, about people long before. I get my 80 or 90 years of life, and then I die, and then there's this great, massive universe that's been going on for who knows how long and will go on for who knows how long. And apparently, no one's discovered the edge of the universe. It just seems to go on forever. And seeing as the light that's out there will, on whatever edge, if there's an edge, is so far away, it will never get here, so we'll never see it. But we all kind of walk around acting like we're the center of everything, and we aren't. I think, I don't know for sure, but I mentioned, this cocoon that I live in, and this energy came into me and left this feeling of eternity in me. My impression is that's probably what talked to me. Talked. It was more like this very intense energy. Just the name of it to me is just this very just kind of burned through all my nerves and everything, and it just completely altered me. Unfortunately, I can't solve the question of who's Allah, or is it Allah or Yahweh or Jesus, because it never gave me a name. It just went. And the other part, like, if you read the Bible, even if you get all the words correct and understood and everything, you still are reading it through your own interpretation. You're not actually talking to it. A lot of people say you can't bump into it. I don't know if I bumped into it, but something bumped into me. which is especially odd because I didn't believe it existed when it showed up. Can you imagine you don't believe there's a God and something like that comes in you and alters you? And there's like, if I'd been going to church, I might have had a context for it, but I don't know. It's an advantage that I didn't have a context because I might have brought in all my childhood and assumptions and everything. I was just left with a great big, huh? And then I started becoming more peaceful and calm. And I was like, well, I guess this is the way to go. So yeah, the energy is very different. It's not at all like what I had in my cocoon. So that old Sinead O'Connor, guide me, God, and I will find you. That was always my prayer. Yeah, it has to be God's friend and ask God to love you. And if you don't believe in God, well, don't be so certain. Just let it come to you and see what happens. Anyway, thank you. It's there. Uh, Thank you. Visit my website, dsmccarron.com, if you find this useful, or even if you don't. If you want to share it with somebody else, that would be cool. I'd appreciate it. I just want to help people get in contact with what's deep and true in them and clean up whatever is hard in them. Okay, thanks. Till next time, Douglas McCarron.